What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Serious Angler podcast, episode number 205. As always, I'm your host, Bailey Eichbrett, and unfortunately tonight, Andrew, the captain, cannot be with us. Fortunately, he's got a lot of stuff on his plate this week, and he's getting ready to get out on the water. Guide trips are coming up for him, I believe, next week. So he's getting pretty busy. He's got a couple things to get taken care of. So there might be some times over the next few months where either Andy or myself, might be riding solo for a couple of these shows. But for the most part, you guys will have us both. So don't think that anything's going to change up here soon. Andrew's obviously taking some time to get things in order, get his ducks in a row, and he will be back with us on Monday. But a couple things for you folks before we introduce our guests for today. We got out on the water this morning, had some client stuff I had to do for my business, some creation and filming, all that jazz, but got to film a video for you guys, had a few hours to get out and actually fish, and did a little spinnerbait for pre-spawn bass, kind of locating pre-spawn fish with a spinnerbait and kind of using it to your advantage. It's actually funny, our guest and I were just talking about spinnerbaits offline here before we introduce him, but I filmed a quick video this morning for you guys that'll be up probably the next few weeks. Try to utilize a spinnerbait for pre-spawn fish and locating this pre-spawn fish. As well as I know people have enjoyed on this channel. I created multiple kayak review videos, performance reviews, setup videos, and it seemed to be the engagement. People enjoyed it. So today I filmed a performance review of the 2021 Hobie PA 360. PA 12 360, excuse me. I filmed a performance review and how I set that thing up. I've gotten about a month and a half in that thing, gotten comfortable with it, and gotten everything where I like it, where I think it's efficient. That'll probably change come the first tournament this year, but for now it's doing well, and film that'll be up here soon on the channel. And we do have some announcements for the show coming up soon. None that I will give out tonight, but some that are coming soon. So stay tuned for that. You'll probably hear about it, I'm hoping, next week. If not next week, the week after at the latest, the third week of April at the latest, you guys will hear about that. But enough of that for now. I think we are going to introduce our guest for today, Mr. Jake Harshman. What's going on, dude?
How are you?
Doing all right, man. How are things down in good old PA? We're probably not actually too far from each other.
Man, the fishing's heating up good. It's been past couple weeks, the fishing's been lights out everywhere, lakes, river, everything. It's been phenomenal. So
heck yeah. Ours are today. I saw our glacial lakes are weird. So like in the north ends, obviously are much shallower, and then the southern ends are like, for most glacial lakes, like 300-400 foot. So they're much colder. So they're like, you'll have a spawn start in the north, and then the spawn in the south end of the lake will start like a month later. those temps take a while to kind of acclimate because it's so much deeper. But I saw 55 degrees today. It was nuts, and it's not even halfway through April. Yeah, it's weird. Like, our fish are behind, but our temperatures are ahead, if that makes any sense. It's weird.
Yeah, our temperatures have been hovering in that same range. And honestly, I mean, for us, that 50-degree mark is when really things start to really just kind of take off. And, it's been a lot of fun. Like last month the end of last month was absolutely amazing. I mean, it was great fishing. And, we've had a couple days now in the 70s too. So some of the smaller lakes are up into the 60-degree range. I would think probably in the next moon cycle, there's probably going to be fish on beds.
Getting up to do the dirty.
Yeah, doing their thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it was kind of weird, dude. And we talk about, obviously small tangent before we get into the depths of the show here. But we had a full moon about, I want to say 2 weeks ago. No.
It was around March 27th, I believe.
So what, about a week and a half or so? That it came around, and I have a small place by me that only gets about 26, 27 foot max. It's not very big. Like, you can cover the circumference of it in probably 15 minutes at max. And I caught some fish. I went and beat the bank for an hour one of the days to get kind of break from work. And I'd caught some fish, had bloody tails. And I was like, the water's really cold. And I look, and that night, that's when I saw the full moon when I was taking the garbage out, or bringing the garbage back to the house at night. I look up in the full moon, and it had me thinking, it's like, I wonder if some fish aren't really temperature variable, or maybe they come up to think that it's time to spawn, but like that temperatures, they just come up and start making beds. It's kind of an interesting.
I think that's probably the case. I think were you catching male fish with bloody tails?
Oh, they were female, only females.
They were females?
Yeah.
Wow.
It had me thinking.
That's wild. I mean, yeah. Most of our fish are probably not going to spawn until there's a 6 in that temperature. Mm-hmm. Whether that means it's 56 or whether that means it's 60, they're probably not spawning until there's a 6 in that temperature. 55, I would say, would probably be the lowest because they know that their eggs aren't going to live. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I wouldn't think. So
right. It's got me thinking a little bit, and I know they're crazy theories. So like, if people are tuning into this, especially if you're on the YouTube, feel free to comment about how much of an idiot I sound. But kind of like I try to bring up these wacky theories, just to kind of test, because like you probably have 1,000 that fail, but like one of them might be dynamite, and you'll have it all to yourself. But like, we have these giants that get caught. These, I'm talking like 7+ that get caught in the pre-spawn, and they're kind of at these staging areas before that spawning area, but you never hear or see them getting caught during the spawn. So it has me thinking that first full moon, if it's that early phase, that they might get up and spawn, do their thing, and get out.
So, and I think that's one of the things with the older fish. I believe they do go through the cycle quicker. I think those older fish will move in, do what they need to do, and then move out because they, just over a period of their lifetime, like they realize that if they stay there, that they're more susceptible to whatever. But that's why the big fish are hard to catch, man. They do things that they just do things different, and they don't make. You're not going to catch a 10-pounder on a bobber with a worm just sitting there dangling it for 4 or 6 hours. Like, it's probably not going to happen. You know what I mean? So they do their things differently. I had the fortunate opportunity last year to catch 7-pound 4-ounce bass, and then the year prior to that I caught an 8-pound 8-ounce bass out of the same lake around the same time of year, and the 8-pound 8-ounce bass was post spawn and the 7-pound bass was pre-spawn, and it was legitimately the same time of year, almost identical water conditions. So the fish always go in phases. Mm-hmm. And normally the biggest fish go first, because they're swollen, they're uncomfortable. It's just like a 9-month pregnant woman. You don't want to mess with her. You just want to. She want to have that baby and go. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So
I think those bigger fish, dude, it's like, obviously because they're older, it's almost like a routine thing. So like when you build a routine and you do it year after year and you get more used to it, it's like anything that's new to you. If you're new to that process, it's going to take you longer. Whereas if you do it over time, it's going to be faster. So they probably get up, do it, gone. Where it's just such a small window where you can catch those older fish, at least getting up to move on better. It's cool because like I if the waters weren't so dangerous, I'm so tempted to get like a wetsuit sometimes and go dive down in those staging areas just to see if there's something funky going down. You know what I mean? But I don't know. That's just my weird brain when I have no time to think.
One addition to that, and for your viewers and whatnot, there's a YouTube channel called The Nature of Fishing. The man is incredibly monotone. He does not have an exciting voice. It's some of the best information, unbiased, not product pushing. Mm-hmm. Like, he just talks about bass behavior, and there is so much to learn. I believe he's a biologist, and he's an avid angler, and he's made a series on basically everything you can imagine that you want to know about as far as bass behavior. He has it on his YouTube channel. Very, very informative channel. One of the channels that I actually, watch over and over the most, just
Right.
because he's not pushing product. He's not out there talking about this $600 rod and how he's throwing, this $95 swim bait. Like, the dude's out there with the oldest equipment, like the stuff in your grandpa's garage that you don't even think works anymore is the stuff he's using. Like,
Hmm.
and he goes out and he's got legit good info.
Hmm.
I would encourage anybody that's getting serious into bass fishing to go watch his channel.
Yeah, I think another great resource as well is like Fish the Moment. I don't know if you've tapped into
Yeah,
his as well. He's really
yeah,
good.
Johnny's good.
Yeah,
Johnny's good.
yeah, without a doubt. But dude, before we get too deep into the show here, I know we're obviously over 10 minutes in. For the folks who may not know you or have heard of you or seen you on social or what have you, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started fishing in the first place, and who got that passion instilled in you as a kid.
Oh man, as a kid, it was I used to go fishing with my grandpap all the time on his boat for walleye. I think that's what really got me into it and really got me going. But as a kid, man, dude, I spent every waking hour that I wasn't in school fishing. Like, it was an addiction. I would grab my fishing rod and go down to the river, and my parents, grandparents, they wouldn't see me for 8 to 10 hours. I would just be gone wading through the river fishing. And I was fishing for whatever would bite. It could have been a trout, sucker, carp, bass, didn't matter. I just wanted to catch everything that I could catch. And, um, that kind of fell off whenever I joined the Air Force. I joined the Air Force right out of high school, and I got, busy, I guess, and didn't fish that much. And when I got out of the Air Force, I needed a hobby, man. I needed a hobby, so I started looking into it again, and I was like, man, look at all these cool kayaks. I'm like, this is a way that I can get on the water that doesn't require a $75,000 bass boat, and it doesn't require a huge amount of storage and all that other stuff. And I, like, the maintenance aspect of it, I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So I went and bought a kayak, and man, from there it got serious. It's serious real quick. A lot of money invested now. I may as well went and bought a bass boat, but
You got a serious rig, which we'll get into in a second. But what was the first kayak you bought?
my first kayak was an Ascend, and I had it for like 3 days. I nothing against Ascend or Bass Pro, brand stuff. It just was not the right boat for me. It didn't paddle well. I had the FS12T, I think. I didn't feel comfortable standing up in it, and and the seat wasn't comfortable. And those three things, I literally had it out on the water for 2 hours one day, and I loaded it up and took it back to Bass Pro and said I wanted a refund, and they gave me a refund. Surprisingly, like they were. So, I mean, they were good about it. And then from there, I went and I bought an Old Town Predator PDL,
Mhm.
and I had that platform for a couple years while I was on the Old Town Pro staff. And then I left the Old Town Pro staff last year. Just going, we went in different directions. They went with the autopilot boat, and I'm a big believer in the Torqeedo. I believe the Torqeedo is a much better motor for the kayaks. So having a competitor's product on my boat didn't really suit well for what they wanted me to do. So,
Right.
uh, I left the team there. I still think Old Town makes a great boat. I love their pedal drive system. Their pedal drive system, outside it, well, propeller driven system, the Old Town system is probably the best.
Hmm.
I do believe the Hobie system is more efficient.
Hmm.
Um, but it's an adjustment if you're going from a circular motion to a kicking motion. So you have to learn that. But um, now I'm running a Hobie PA 14 360, and I have a Torqeedo on it. Last year, the end part of last year, I had a Hobie PA-12 360, and I just wanted more room, wanted more space. If I'm taking it, going all across the country and doing these big tournaments and stuff, it's not that I felt cramped in a PA-12. I just wanted something bigger. So that's why I went with the 14 this year. But yeah, I love my boat, man. It's a good boat. It's that 360 system is wild. What you can do with it, the boat management aspect of it.
Dude, like I was talking to my local, I work with Morgan Marine up here on Keuka Lake. Ryan Kennedy hooked me up last year and decided to work together, and he hooked me up with the Hobie. And I came from, my first kayak was a Field and Stream Shadowcaster that was practically a barge. That thing was
Right.
so slow and hard to paddle. And I went to a Wilderness Radar 135, and making the switch from that radar to a pro angler was like mind-boggling. It was like you're on a spaceship. The craftsman that goes into a Hobie, dude, is like I think the first thing I said to Ryan, I was like, did Elon Musk make this kayak? Just the simple engineering and thought that went behind all of it. It was just impressive. But dude, you got you're rocking Panoptics, aren't you?
Yeah. It's
I think we've had a little discussion about this before, I think through Josh's Instagram lives, but I'm very curious kind of how this system, because I know it's you have to use your hand to manually operate where it's with the direction, correct?
So, I mean, some people put the Panoptic system on a pole that you can move. Um, I I don't see a lot of value in that because it takes my hand off my fishing rod,
Right.
and I can look at the fish all day long, but if my hand's not on my fishing rod, I can't catch them. So I made a PVC pipe. It's a homemade deal, stationary thing. I attach the mount to it, and I drop it over the side just like you would with a kayak that doesn't have a transducer scupper or something like that. I drop it over the side and I point it forward. And that's, I mean, 90% of the time that I'm fishing, I'm on forward view and it's pointing directly forward where my kayak is pointed. With the 360 boat, I don't feel that I need to have it on a turn system, because I can just turn my boat and be looking at where I'm casting and, fishing in front of me. So I like it that way. I don't feel the need to move it or adjust it. The only time I will move or adjust it is if I'm going to down view or if I'm going to the perspective mode. The down view obviously shoots directly down, gives you a very wide cone angle of what's below you. And the perspective mode, I haven't mastered that yet. I really need to work on figuring out which settings are best for that. I haven't gotten really the hang of that one yet. But it's for your shallow water, like 10 foot and less. You flip it and it basically gives you a down view of what's in front of you in shallow water. And if you watch some of the videos of it, it's insane. Like, you can watch fish swimming in front of you. You can see two fish spawning on a stump. You know what I mean? Like, it's wild, the things that you can see with it. But it's an amazing system. The technology, and I'm not Garmin. I'm not tied into Garmin in any way, but they were the first ones with it. But now you have the Lowrance. I want to say it's Active Target. I could be mistaken.
Yes.
And then now you have the Humminbird getting ready to come out with their Mega Live. I am very curious to see what they do with that, because Mega Imaging is by far better than anything out there right now. And I can't even imagine what Mega Live Imaging. I mean, I think you're swimming with the fish at that point.
You've seen the scales on them.
Right. Like, you may now be able to tell the difference between an Asian carp and a largemouth bass on Kentucky Lake.
Yeah, I mean, that's the next step, right? I mean, Panoptics and Active Target are so good, and like if you get dialed enough with your settings and obviously with your time in the water and experiencing and actually looking at fish, you can tell like the difference between them. But like I feel like that's the next step, right? Is actually getting an image, not like a 3D like color and everything, but like a more accurate outline of that fish, not just some blob, so you can kind of get an idea. of what a faster notion be like, okay, yeah, it's just a carp moving on, instead of taking that 2 minutes and wasting your time on a fish.
I think, I mean, so the live imaging, what's been the most beneficial for me is teaching me what mood those fish are in. Because if you cast a lure in there and you pull it through and they scatter, but then come back to that area and you do it again and they scatter, you should change your lure. You should throw something else. So it helps you get through that transition process of what you're going to catch them on a lot quicker. It definitely helps you find them quicker, which is nice, but in my opinion, it's helped me more in like, okay, there's a group of fish, I pull my lure through it and they don't eat it, and they they scattered from it, or they came up and looked at it and then didn't eat it. If they came up and looked at it, I'm probably got the presentation speed right. I just probably don't have the color right, or I don't have the profile right. You know what I mean? So it's like change something, and then you end up catching them. But yeah, it's a, dare I say it, a game changer.
The taboo word of the fishing industry.
Such a ridiculous word.
Yeah. But I'm glad
I don't know.
you mentioned about, because like I've seen so many guys with the swing arm, right? And like I can't tell you how many fish I lose from a pedal drive system from adjusting my steering and getting that bite, right? I've lost fish like that. But now you add a whole nother element of swinging that arm. That's a whole nother thing to waste your time. But I'm glad you mentioned that it's fixed, because with that 360 jibe, like, you already have it on a handle, essentially. Right. You're just at your feet. So it's so much smarter to do it that way.
Yeah, it just, what's the alternative? Like, I go spend $100 and some odd on somebody else's mount, or I go spend $15 on some PVC and make it myself, and I do the same thing. The only difference is I turn my boat, you turn your handle. But when you're turning your handle, you can't turn the handle of your reel either, because your hand's off of it. You know what I mean? And that doesn't matter if you're right-handed or left-handed. For me, I reel left-handed. So if I'm turning my boat to look at something, I still have my rod in my hand, so I can still maintain, pressure on that fish. And then if I need to, hurry up and reel, I can. Like, I just, I don't know. It's a really cool system, and I don't need to be fancy with it. I'm fancy enough with what I can see in front of me, I guess.
Right.
So
I'll tell you what, obviously I'm in love with the Hobie. Don't get me wrong. I think if they were to fix one thing, I think it were to be to somehow get that transducer haul towards the front of the boat. Because for me, I am such an offshore guy, and I love dropping on fish.
I'm a drop behind you.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like it's right below you, so like I either have to like point my rod down somehow or like drop behind, and that can be, it's just inefficient. Not saying you can't adjust, but if I have it towards the front, I can have it right there where I can literally go around and like pretty much, because like I'm an electronics guy too, I can have it go around. I can have my 2D, or in your case, I mean Panoptics too. Obviously, it probably takes that out of it. I mean, you can fish in front of you rather than dropping on fish. But
well, I mean, if I'm offshore, I throw it into down view, and the reason I do that is because I get a wider angle of what's beneath me. If I'm looking forward, I get a lot of what's in front of me, and I can see it from a distance. But if I'm trying to drop on fish, I go down view. It's so nice. But I don't fish like that a lot either. I don't enjoy fishing offshore. I don't, like, a drop shot is a taboo thing to me. It's just not my deal. It's not the kind of thing I like. And that's probably why I struggle in deeper water lakes. So, but it's it's definitely nice with that down view where you can kind of see exactly where you're dropping at. If you see a fish and you cast out to it, you can cast past them and drag that bait up to them, so it's not hitting them on the head. You know what I mean? And it just gradually shows up in front of them. Like, you can do that with your Panoptics. It's really cool.
Yeah,
so
that is really cool. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a northern thing in me. I just love being off the bank, but but either way, it's a good segue into my next topic here for you, and it's something I'm really curious about because I only did my first national tournament on the kayak side this past November at Chickamauga, and granted, you're allowed, those events you're allotted like you can practice for however long you wanted. You can practice a month, you can practice a day, you don't have to practice, that sort of deal.
Right.
And I'm curious to ask you, is because like we have that national championship coming up for bass down in Texas. So you have, and I think it's the first kayak tournament that at least I, in my experience, that I've heard that you're allowed to, or you're restricted on your practice time. I don't know of any other kayak tournament that's restricted the amount of time you're allowed to practice.
I think there's a couple local ones that might do it.
Right.
I don't know of any national.
Maybe the TOC. I don't know.
I think the TOC is restricted this year. It was
Okay.
not restricted last year.
Okay. Yeah. So we have 2.5 days. So I'm asking you because you have a lot more experience on that national circuit. When you go to these big bodies of water, you're in a kayak, obviously not made to cover the amount of water that a boat could cover. How are you approaching that to therefore be able to cover ground? But I guess let me rephrase that. What is your approach to practice? Say you have only 3 days and you want to maximize the time and efficiency of your practice. What's kind of like your general way of approaching that?
If the tournament's this Saturday, I started practice in January with maps.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, I mean it legit. I spend almost every waking hour, you know, dealing with something with fishing. Even when I'm at work and should be working, I'm probably still thinking about fishing. No, I just a lot of map study, man. I like to get onto Google Earth Pro. If you're not using Google Earth Pro, you're wrong. Especially if you're fishing the national scene, like you've got to get on there and you've got to use that. There's so much information to learn based
Huge.
on a dog, based on different views of the lake at different times of the year. Um, you can find so many cool things with that program. um, with having the Garmin, I also have an app called Active Captain, which is similar to Navionics. So what's nice is I can go on Active Captain, I can be sitting here on my phone looking on Google Earth Pro and be on Active Captain at the same time, see something on Google Earth Pro, pull it up on Active Captain, and lay a waypoint to it right there. So whenever I go to my fish finder, I'll have every waypoint. It's not science, but it gets you right in the general vicinity,
Mm-hmm.
where you don't have to do like the memory card swap, this, that, and the other, and all that kind of stuff to get the Google Earth Pro waypoints to your fish finder.
Mm-hmm.
But that'll start 3 months in advance. Um, with as many tournaments as I have been fishing, a lot of times that can get confusing. Um, but some of the fortunate stuff is like, well, okay, fishing similar bodies of water. But I mean, I'm practicing in my mind. I'm practicing 3 months in advance with map study. Um, and then really after that, it comes down to, even with the map study, you have to kind of look and say, okay, well, what time of year is it? What time of year is a tournament? What kind of water temperatures am I going to be expecting? Am I going to be able to catch fish shallow consistently? Is it something I'm going to have to fish offshore? You know what I mean? Like these are the kind of the thoughts that are going through my head in this 3 month time period when I'm going on looking at stuff. Um, I'm obviously, if I'm fishing a spawn time tournament, I'm probably not going to be looking offshore at all. If I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking offshore, I'm looking at staging points and finding the creek channels and finding the points that are on those creek channels and doing that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But you can limit, or you can eliminate a lot of things based on the time of year. Summertime, you're probably going to be in a lot of the lakes. You're probably going to be fishing offshore, or you're looking for grass beds, which you can find on Google Earth Pro. You can find grass beds. And grass isn't the same every year, but it gives you an idea,
Generally, where
where
it could be. Yeah.
right. You can find that kind of stuff, and then it's that bite, in my opinion, is a lot more fun than an offshore bite. When you come up to a grass bed and you can throw a buzzbait or chatterbait on the edges, or a frog over top of mats. And I'm
Mhm.
not a big puncher. I don't like to punch. But I just feel like in kayaks you lose a lot of fish punching. But um, it's like, that's, to me, that's a lot more fun. And honestly, it doesn't take as much time either.
Right.
You know.
Yeah, that's
So,
a
but
really good
yeah,
point. Yeah, that preliminary practice, right, where you're not even on the water to start actually getting things dialed down, because there's people that, and I give them all the props, is that they can just show up to practice and get on the water and go get an idea, do like a maybe an hour or two looking at the map to get an idea of things. And it's like, I can't do that, because like in my head I'll be going crazy, because I'm thinking about all the missed opportunities that I could have done if I put in more work and all that, because I'm doing the same thing. Like, I'm already starting for Texas. I started as soon as they announced Possum Kingdom. I probably already had like 200 things waypointed out on Google Earth that same
right.
day they announced it was Possum Kingdom. But it's one of those things, and I totally agree that the use of Google Earth, for one. I mean, when Edwin Evers dropped that video of using Google Earth Pro, I was like, son of a... But it was like, but no, it's such a interesting, um, I guess, topic to go down with kayak fishing, is because your decisions have an elevated weight to them with what you do. Like, you can't just choose something. Hey, I'm going to start here in the morning, and then fire up your motor and go 10 miles. Right? You are living and dying for the most part by your decisions on tournament day. And
Well, and to that point as well, when I'm on Google Earth Pro, and I should have mentioned this earlier, when I'm on Google Earth Pro and looking at things and laying down waypoints, I'll lay down waypoints everywhere. And then I go back through and I say, okay, well, where's the closest launch? So then I'm
mhm.
looking at launches compared to the amount of waypoints that I have in a certain area. So then I'll go when I do finally get there to be able to pre-fish, those areas where I have the most waypoints or the most areas of interest listed around the launches, is I'll start there. And if I can build on that, then I'll, okay, well, now I'll go to a different area and try that. Another thing I like to do is I like to find obscure water, which you can find on Google Earth or Google Earth Pro.
Mhm.
Um, I like to find those areas that are connected, but like a lot of times the bass boats aren't getting there, or it may take you some time. You know what I mean? Like, um, Wisconsin on the Mississippi River. Like, there was an area that I found, and I was like, man, nice. That looks really good. A lot of people are gonna think that also looks really good. I had limited time there, but when I was like, man, that looks really good, let me find where's the closest place I can launch. And the closest place I could launch took me around a big fork, and I had to go around a long way. And I'm like, no, there's got to be something better than this. Like, there's got to be. And I started looking, and I started using. At the time, I was using Onyx Hunt, but
Mhm.
now I use. Oh gosh, what's the new one? Far Wide. I use Far Wide now for land ownership, and I found a public walking trail that led all the way up to the edge of the water. Like, guess what? That's public access, and I can
Yeah,
put a boat in here.
yeah.
So yeah, did it require about 3/4 of a mile of me wheeling my kayak? Sure, it did. Did it suck? Absolutely. But it was worth it, because I mean, I was at that spot 45 minutes before anybody else was that launched at the main launch, because I was willing to put in that effort and that work. And sometimes that's what it is. Like, you have to be willing to. You got to know what your limits are.
Mhm.
Um, like, if you're fishing a body of water that you're dropping your kayak down over a 20-foot bank to get into the water, you have to understand that you got to pull your kayak back out of that 20-foot bank.
Yeah. It's not you're using that truck to pull it out. You are using your own physical strength to do all that.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, a long day, especially a long practice day, that sucks.
Yeah.
You don't want to do anything at the end of a long practice day, especially if you're covering ground.
Yeah, just want to eat and go to bed.
Yeah, exactly. And that was one of the things that I did. And it, like, because, dude, in November on Chick, I went and I tried to find fall schools and that tournament turned out to be really tough for a lot of people. And one of the days I put in over 22 miles on that river just trying to find schools that could kind of be like, all right, I know not a lot of guys are going to be on the main river. So if I can find something, I'm going to have it to myself. And I ended up finding some schools of spotted bass of all things. And they were only 15 inches. And I'm like, oh, this isn't going to win. And they probably would have gotten me done. I would have done really well on it if I had caught 15 inches on that tournament day. But I ended up finding what actually was a spring way back in a creek. And I had 2 casts in there and caught a 4-pounder and a 5-pounder. And I saw more in there. I'm like, money, I'm gone. I'm leaving.
Right.
And tournament morning, we're all loaded up at the launch, and it's like a 1.5 mile pedal. And completely slips my mind when a boat launches and goes that direction. I didn't even think of it. And I make that 1.5 mile pedal. And where does that boat? Right on top of that spring. It's like, son of a, show up. They're like, yeah, we caught 26 pounds already. And I'm like, there goes tournament day. Because that spotted bass area was literally, I would have had to pedal the 1.5 mile back. I would have to pick up, drive 30 minutes. And then it was another 3 miles pedal to that area. And it's like, that's your whole tournament day gone.
Right.
So it's like, it adds this emphasis on what your decision is come tournament morning, like what you're going to do. And it's just one of those deals, man. It's adds a different element in the kayak fishing realm.
Yeah, you have to take all that into consideration. You really do, as far as the length of travel from the launch to where you're going. I prefer to be as far away from people as I possibly can.
Yeah.
Especially other competitors. I do not like fishing shoulder to shoulder with people. So if that means that I'm going to pedal 4 or 5 miles to get to a spot, I have to know that I have to have confidence in that spot in order to do that. But I will do that. You know what I mean? I will pedal that far just to get away from everybody else. It's just fishing on top of each other. You end up hurting you end up hurting each other because you're catching the same fish. You're fishing for the same fish, and you're really just you're hurting each other. And it's an evil in kayak fishing that we have to kind of accept because of our limitation with range. But if people are willing to put in the work, they can definitely get out there and get further away. But you have to understand that all your eggs are in that basket for that tournament day. Because if you make a 4 or 5 mile pedal, or even motoring in a kayak, you make that kind of trek, you're probably not relaunching somewhere else.
You are living and dying in that area.
Right. Yeah.
Now, when it comes to those obviously, I'm sure it could be tournament dependent, but like, are you start running gun in different launches, or are you going to pick a select few launches and kind of hunker down in those areas during practice?
In practice, I will run and gun. I will run and gun and try to find something until I find something and I'm like, yeah, I like this. I will run and gun in practice. I'll sometimes launch 3 different places in a day. And I don't spend a lot of time fishing though either. Like right. I'll go to a spot, I'll see what I can see on an electronics, and maybe I'll drop or cast to them a couple times. But I don't like to fish hard during practice.
You waste a lot of time when you're casting in inefficient areas that you don't know much about. It's right. Like you're developing clues as to, okay, maybe I should stop, cast here a little while. Not much is going. All right, I'm wasting my time. Keep on going.
Yeah, I'll give you a perfect example of that. So Lake Seminole in 2019, I had such a hard time on that body of water in pre-fishing. very hard time. I couldn't find a good pattern. I couldn't find good groups of fish. And I was launching, going different places. And finally, on the last day, on Friday, it was like raining and cold and windy. And I'm like, I'm not even getting on the water. Like, I'm just going to go drive around and look at stuff. And I pulled up to a spot and I was like, man, I was like, this looks like the juice. It just looked fantastic. And I'm like, I'm coming here tomorrow. Sight unseen, didn't get on the water, showed up there tournament morning. I was the only person there, proceeded to put up 90 some inches out of that spot. The next day, put up 87 inches out of that spot and left with a giant check and came home as the champion.
Hell yeah.
You don't have to go out and blister these fish up in pre-fishing or practice to do well. And most of the time, like Kentucky Lake was another example. I went to a spot, checked it out. I was like, man, this looks good. Like, this is really cool. I didn't even cast. I just left.
Mm-hmm.
I said, this is where I'm coming. I'm coming here. And I showed up there the next day, and I ended up in 5th place at the end of day 1. Didn't catch a limit on day 2, but it's one of those things. Like, you don't have to go out there and fish an area hard and pre-fishing in order to do well in a tournament. You just have to. You kind of have to have confidence in it. If you see something you like and you're marking fish or that fish should be there because of that time of year, just be confident in it, And I mean, that could segue into something else if you wanted it to real quick.
Yeah, I mean, real quick before we segue into that, because I mean, I was already thinking of a different tangent off what we're talking about. We'll get to that later, but I want to quickly just add in that I slightly disagree with you at that point. I think that there's a good amount of anglers that, like yourself, that can see an area and be like, yes, like this has the deal. They don't really need to fish it for a while and know that it has potential. I think that chalks up to good angler intuition, and that comes with experience, where there's not a I don't want to call it a majority, but there is a number of anglers out there where they probably need to put in that time to get a good feeling for an area. They can't just show up and be like, yeah, that's good. Or it might look good, but really it's just not going to produce. It's catching the angler versus showing you what's actually potential.
So I can agree to that to an extent, but that leads me into the next point. And have you watched the 5-part series that Gerald Swindle talked about positive mental attitude?
I watched the first one.
Seen it? You got to watch the 5-part series. Like, if you have that positive mental attitude, the only way you're not going to catch fish is if they're not there. If you go out there and say, I'm going to catch them, if you look at this area and you feel confident in it and you go back there and like, I know that they're there, I'm going to catch them, you're probably going to catch them. Mm-hmm. And some of like what you said, some of it's instinctual, some of it's, knowledge based, but I don't have a great knowledge base for bass. I grew up fishing for walleye. Like I don't know a lot about bass. I'm learning more and more every day. But if it looks fishy, if it feels fishy and you have confidence in it, I think 7 times out of 10 you're gonna have success in it, as long as you're doing your homework and you're not just like, oh, I'm just gonna go on the map and go there. Like, no, like look at it, actually pay attention, see what's there, see what's around it, creek channels, points, all these different things. If it has all the things necessary that you think that fish needs to survive or needs to be able to live there, and you can establish confidence in it, you're probably going to go there and catch them.
Yeah. I think one thing to add on that too, adding on the point of staying positive, right, and having confidence in something, I think to add on that, if you're a guy that shows up to the ramp and says, oh, crap, Jake Harshman's here, no, we're screwed. If you have that mentality, you already lost.
Yeah, you can't. Listen, and that's with life, man. That's not just with fishing. I don't give you. I mean, can I curse on your podcast?
Go for it, dude. You're good.
I don't give a shit who shows up in my ramp. If I have confidence in an area, it's I mean, Russ Snyder's could come up, and it doesn't even matter. Like, and out, that actually happened to me at Seminole. Russ showed up at my launch on day 2 down at Lake Seminole, and and he thought I was upset that he was there, and I just had no knowledge that he was there. I didn't pay any attention to it. Like, it didn't matter to me who else was there,
Right.
because I had confidence and knowledge that I was going to catch fish that lived there. That's really what you have to have, man. That's what, you can't worry about what other people are doing ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Fishing's one of those things where it's like, you need to remember it's you versus the fish. Granted,
Yeah.
yes, you're trying to beat other people, but just to even start out, it's you versus the fish. And that's all it really
100%.
comes up to. Yeah. But so the segue I wanted to go into talking about practice was, if you're getting in an area or you're setting up a pattern, are you a guy to lay off the fish, or are you going to keep catching those fish? If you're like, say you're developing a pattern, and I'll give you an example. On Chickamauga, the first couple of days of practice, it was really cold. It was a really cold week, and my biggest mistake in that week was I didn't realize, because I had a bluff wall pattern going, and I was throwing it was a Fritz side 9, so it was a deeper flat side, and basically I found a bluff wall deal, and everyone's throwing spinnerbaits and square bills, but I was throwing the flat side. Yada yada. Basically, it got really warm on the weekend. That's where I went wrong. But what I'm trying to say is, getting back to my point, is I figured out that pattern running. So basically, once I figured out, because I kind of have a thing where it's 3 fish rule. If you catch 3 doing it, then it's set in stone. It's a pattern. Basically, what I did is I took my treble hooks off and I started running different bluff walls and creeks to see if it would kind of pan out and see if I was correct, which it did. But that's my question to you: is, are you a guy where it's like, you don't think it matters to catch fish in practice, or are you a guy that you're going to try to shake fish off, lay off of them, that sort of deal?
I definitely lay off of them. If I catch 1 or 2, in that area that I'm fishing, I'll lay off of them. I'll mark stuff with electronics, but I definitely won't fish for them, because all you're doing is teaching them stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you teach too many of them, that might hurt you, especially in a 2-day tournament. And most of the national events that I'm fishing are the Hobie events. And if you're talking about managing an area for 2 days, you really have to be cognizant of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A perfect example of that's the Coosa River. I pre-fished an area in the Coosa River last year, and in 5 casts, I caught 3 fish, and they were just absolutely schwacking a jig. Like they wanted it, like, literally as soon as they hit the waters. And I'm like, oh God, oh God. And I did that 3 times, and I was like, all right, I'm done. And I just kind of, motored through the area, looked at stuff and looked at different targets and that kind of thing. And I ended up running into Christine Fisher and Jackson Orr, and found out that they were going to be fishing there as well. And I said, hey, I was like, we all kind of found this independently. I'm like, I think we're all going to end up being here. And she's like, yeah. And Jackson's like, yeah. And I was like, well, let's be responsible and figure this out. So we did. But I definitely laid off of those fish in practice, and I definitely laid off of those fish after I had, a decent limit in the first part of the day, because I knew there were like 4 at that point. There were like 4 or 5 other people fishing there, and it was one of those things where, if I'm coming back here tomorrow because this is all I have to manage this. But I was also around people that were doing the same thing, and I would caution against that. If you're around people who are not managing fish, whack them, sore lip every single one of them, because they might be sore lipping them behind you, and you're not going to be able to catch them tomorrow anyway. So catch them, catch them. But you have to be mindful of that in the area that you're fishing. If you're fishing in a group with people, but if, like, at Kentucky Lake, or not at Kentucky Lake, where was the other one? At the Mississippi River, I caught 3 fish in practice, and I was the only person there. And I'm like, all right, I'm not catching anymore, because they were good ones. Like, there was like 2 17-inch fish and 1 18. And I'm like, I don't want to catch any more of these.
Yeah.
It's cool if I catch a bunch of 12s, but I don't want to catch any more of these. So, I just kind of laid off of them there. Like, I'm definitely that guy that will lay off of them in practice.
Yeah.
I just don't see any. I mean, what do you benefit by catching them in practice? Aside from having fun, what do you benefit?
Right.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
I guess besides from getting yourself some relative confidence from getting more bites, I don't know. For me, it's one of those things like even if it's a grass deal, somewhere around here, a summer grass deal, I'll go and flip grass. I'll get 1 or 2 bites within an area, and I'll hop and I'll think, okay, maybe it's a deep grass bite, and I'll hop to a different section and I'll find some grass. If I get a bite out of there, like I told you, when I get that 3 bites, then I'm pulling that jig back and I'm pulling out maybe like a Texas rig. I'm pulling out a dummy. I'm not even gonna have a hook on it. I'm gonna go back to flipping that grass, and I'm gonna run different sections just to see if I'm getting more bites, and then it's okay. I got the deal. It's just
My best. Oh, sorry, this is not you.
You're good. You're
I'm
good.
yawning at you.
I'd be yawning at me too.
My best pre-fishing technique is a wacky rig Senko without a hook. I tie directly onto an O-ring and I put the worm in there, and I, if I use a zinker, if I use a Z-Man bait, I probably will only go through one wacky rig Senko the entire pre-fishing. Because I mean, let's be realistic. I don't know many other fish outside of a bass that are going to bite a Senko. If you throw it into a bassy place, I mean, you can tell the difference between a bass and a bluegill, you
Right.
know. So,
Yeah.
um, but yeah, I mean, that's one of my best pre-fishing baits. And then I have an old jackhammer that I bent. I was skipping underneath of a dock and I bent the hook really bad, so I just bent the hook completely in, and I use that for pre-fishing too.
There you go. Yeah, I have. Yeah, right. And on top of that too, like talking about baits that you beat up, so they're not practice baits, right? I have a couple chatterbaits in my chatterbait box that have the point started rusting out on me, or they've been in. So I take them and I take wire cutters and I cut them right at that bait keeper. So now I have I have a few practice chatterbaits. So it keeps the action. You just don't have the hook. So you're gonna get bit. You're gonna feel them, and you can just thumb them, let them run with it till they let it go, because they're gonna realize quick that it's metal. And you're like, okay, now you're not hooking those fish, but you're still being able to present a chatterbait, presentation.
I had a fish at Seminole in 2019. At the end of the day, I was sitting on my spot. I mean, I had 90 some inches and was sitting in, I think, second or third place. And I was throwing a shaky head in like 15 feet of water, and I was throwing into a big eddy. And I had a fish pick up my shaky head, swim out into the current with it, swim back into the eddy, and just kind of swam around with it. And he just had a hold of it the entire time for probably like 30 or 45 seconds swimming around with it. And I finally I'm like, dude, you're stupid. And I pulled the trigger, and it ended up being like a 19 and a quarter-inch fish. I was like, all right, well, like, that's cool. Like,
if they're dumb to hold on to a piece of metal for that long, they're probably dumb enough to bite again.
I just figured, I'm like, man, I'm like, you ain't gonna let it go, dude. It's not your day. Like,
and there's a point too, like especially if you have a hook, where it's like you don't want those fish to swallow it. So you're like, do I stick the hook? Do I wait for a while? Like, do I give him the hook? I don't know. It's a funny conversation.
I think this fish was like generally mad that it was there, and he might have dropped it. He or she, I don't know, whatever the sex. I don't want to assume the gender of the fish, but whatever that fish's gender was, I don't. It may have dropped it and picked it back up a couple times, but I know that it was interested in it for a solid 30 or 45 seconds. And he wanted to make sure that whatever it was, that it didn't come back. Well, yeah. He ended up on my board, so.
There you go. Well, dude, I got 2 questions left for you. The last one's more of a fun question to wrap things up. And but my one question to you is, like, Pennsylvania is probably not known as, besides Lake Erie, as a good state for bass fishing, right? Mm-hmm. So my question to you is, you seem to have adjusted pretty well when you've traveled around the country and fishing these tournaments. And my question for you is, being from Pennsylvania, what part of it has helped you kind of adjust to these different locations? Is it more of just because of that bass intuition like we spoke of before? Or is there something that's kind of helped you? Is there a diverse fishery, that sort of thing, that's helped you kind of prepare?
So we're here where I'm at in central Pennsylvania. I'm incredibly fortunate. I can travel an hour and a half, 2 hours south and fish an amazing grass fishery in the upper Chesapeake Bay. It's tidal water. I have the Susquehanna River in my backyard. So if you're talking about shallow, rocky rivers and smallmouth, I got that. I can go to mountain reservoirs and fish deep water lakes and drop shot and do all that crazy stuff and have that. I have it. I I hate the fact that Pennsylvania is not spoken of in a bass sense because the only people when you mention Pennsylvania, people are like, oh, Lake Erie or oh, the Susquehanna River. Oh, we got so much more than that. We got so much more than that. Just people just don't know about it because there's no famous YouTubers, filming on our lakes. But there are lakes here that if there were famous YouTubers, people would be like, yo, did you hear about Lake whatever in Pennsylvania? Because we have those fish here. I mean, there are fish, there are 7 and 8 pound fish swimming around in our lakes that are there to be caught. And it's just, it's just not known. And that's actually, it's funny that you mentioned that or asked me that question. I kind of have a YouTube playlist starting this year that I'm focusing on that. I want Pennsylvania to be put on the map for bass fishing, for largemouth bass specifically. Everybody knows Pennsylvania for Susquehanna, for Susquehanna and Lake Erie smallmouth. And when you talk about Pennsylvania fishing, people automatically talk about trout. No, no. Go to those trout lakes and fish for bass, and throw a big Huddleston around and see what happens.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna encounter fish that you didn't know lived there.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So
that'd be cool. That's gonna be cool to watch. And for folks tuning in, Jake's YouTube channel will and all of his socials for that matter will be linked down below in the description, whether you're watching or you're listening on an audio format. So go ahead and check him out, and definitely highly recommend watching some of his fishing videos.
And just sometimes I'm a little unorthodox in my methods, though. So maybe.
So go let him know that in the comments.
Do things a little crazy sometimes.
Crazy's good though.
Yeah, it is.
Crazy wins derbs. So right on. But so, dude, the last question I have for you, and we're gonna wrap this up after this question, is if you could sit down, have a beer, have a steak with 3 different individuals, whether 1,000 years ago or they're currently alive now. They don't even have to be the fishing industry. What 3 individuals would you invite to sit down, have a beer, have a steak, and pick their brain?
Dick Winters. He was
Who's this guy? I have never heard of him.
So he was the lieutenant on Band of Brothers for Easy Company. He's passed. He was the lieutenant that became major, like made it all the way up through the ranks. He's from Hershey, Pennsylvania.
The actor movie?
He was a war hero. He was a World War II war hero.
Okay.
But
I thought you were talking about the show, the TV show.
No, I am talking about the show, but the show's based on true life events.
Right.
Band of Brothers is based on a lot of true life events. Dick Winters is somebody who I've read a lot about and know a lot about. I would have loved to have met him before he died. He's an inspiration. Let's see, 2 and 3. I don't like a lot of people, so. I would like to think Jerome Bettis would be fun to hang out with. Because I'm a big Steelers fan. I would have liked to
TikTok stuff. You're not with the Juju dancing TikTok stuff.
No, man, I condemned Juju this year whenever I seen he started dancing on teams' logos, and I'm like, bro, you guys have barely beat anybody serious. Chill. And they proved that later on. So, man, the last one is my grandpa.
That'd be cool.
I never really had the opportunity to sit down and have a drink with my grandpa. He passed before I was of age, and anything that I did illegally underage, he wasn't a part of. So I think it would have been it would have been really cool to sit down with my pap and have a beer and just BS, especially in that group with Jerome Bettis, my grandpap, and Dick Winters. Which you got to search Dick Winters, man. You got to go through and look at some of his accomplishments while he was in the military.
I'm gonna have to, and I'm mad at myself for not putting that piece together because, like, I've watched the TV show, but I didn't actually put.
And his name is Richard too. It's Richard Winters, but his obviously it's Dick Winters.
Right. Yeah.
But
that's a cool trio, dude. I like that.
Again, man. Appreciate it.
Of course. Is there anything you would like the folks to know before we sign off here tonight? Because I don't have any closing notes, so we'll leave it to you if you got something for.
Man, I'm open. If somebody agrees, disagrees, or has questions about anything we talked about, message me, man. We'll talk about it. Let's learn. If you think I'm wrong, let's teach each other something. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm wrong, but I think that if it opens up discussion. If people want to talk about it, hit me up. I am going to do a little giveaway. I'm going to do a little surprise giveaway once this episode airs. You told me that I didn't have to include you on it, but I am going to include you on it because that's you give me the opportunity to be on your platform. I want to make sure you're included on it. So make sure you stay tuned and watch my social for that, and then I'm sure you'll repost it or post it, whatever the case, however you're going to do that. But man, I just wish everybody good luck and stay safe. The water temperatures right now aren't, at least up here for us, they're not safe to be out there doing silly, crazy stuff. You still got about another month before those water temperatures are safe. So be safe. Make sure you're wearing your PFD. And if you're in incredibly cold bodies of water, make sure you're wearing some sort of dry suit and not, that second layer of protection. And at a minimum, have a spare change of clothes and a towel and some fire starting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the dummy that goes out at ice out. I'll admit it, without a dry suit, but I do take a dry bag with me, and it has towels, extra, whole thing of clothes, extra bibs, extra jacket when it has.
Being prepared is a big part. You know what I mean? You may not have to have a dry suit, but understand that if you're fishing in that kind of temperature, make sure you're prepared. Make sure you have that extra clothing. Make sure you have fire starting material and a blanket and a towel, because that might save your life. It might save your life.
Yeah. No, it's a very, very good point too. Yeah, I completely agree with that. Stay safe, guys. There's no closing notes tonight, so basically we're gonna end it here with Jake. And dude, appreciate you coming on the show. It's been a blast.
Appreciate you having me, man.
Of course, you're welcome anytime, dude. And we'll stay tuned and take care, man. We'll talk soon.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Yep. Bye.